My name's Liz, as Heather mentioned. I'm a financial empowerment facilitator at Momentum, which again is a local not-for-profit. We are going pretty fast today, so I've included my email here, lizw@momentum.org, in case there are questions that we don't have time to answer during the presentation. But that email is also appearing in the video where you see my lovely smiling face right after my name, lizw@momentum.org. So hopefully you can see that, but I will mention it again later. Oops. So who is Momentum? As Heather mentioned, Momentum works with people living on low incomes and partners in our community. And our mission is to create a thriving local economy for everyone. And we've been doing that for over 30 years. So how we do that is by providing free education in a few different areas. But what we will be talking about today is money management. So how we provide free education on money management is we hold these money management workshops. So you can either take them online with a facilitator, such as myself, on Monday nights, 6:30 to 8:30. We do them in person at our offices on Tuesday afternoons, 1:30 until about 3:30. And our office is right by Franklin Station for those of us who are familiar with the train lines. Or you can take these money management workshops as on-demand videos, and those are all available at courses.momentum.org. And again, all of this is free. So pick which way you'd like to take the workshops. There's kind of three different ways. And I just wanted to mention that if you complete all 5 of our core topics, which we are going to breeze over pretty quickly today, then we do also issue a certificate of completion. And those certificates have been used in past for everything from applications to rental apartments to resumes. And if you receive income support, sometimes your caseworker may ask for that certificate of completion. So those are our money management workshops. You can do one or you can do them all. But if you wanted to take your learning a little bit further, we also have what we call matched savings programs. So now you will get to learn about the basic pillars of money management, as well as a couple other additional topics. And if you can commit to saving money in your own bank account, then Momentum will match your savings on a 3-to-1 basis. So as an example, if you save $50 that month and you show your facilitator your bank statement proving that you've saved $50, at the end of the program, we will give you $150. So again, it's a 3-to-1 match. There's a few other restrictions around that about what you are able to use that match towards. It must be used towards a productive asset, for example. But you can find out more about those different money management programs on momentum.org. Or again, you can email me, lizw@momentum.org, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has about those. All right, so let's talk about the 5 basics of money management. So at Momentum, we look at the 5 essentials as these topics here. So budgets are all about being in control of your money and having a spending plan for your money. Banking is about, now that you have money, where do you put it? Credit is your availability to borrow money. Assets is recognizing that to solve life's problems and reach our goals, money doesn't always solve the problem, or sometimes money isn't always available. So what do you do? Well, there's other resources and services that you can tap into to help you get through those challenges. And then consumerism is, of course, spending that money, but it's also your rights as a consumer. So everyone here spends money on products and services. So we're all consumers, and it's important that everyone recognize their rights and responsibilities as a consumer. How's everyone feeling so far about that? Okay, I'm assuming we're good. Let me just get yeah, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, fantastic. So let's dive into these 5 basics of money management then, starting with budgets. So budgets are not a diet for your money, although they are a spending plan. So it's about prioritizing, right? And so you're going to have your needs in there, but you're also going to have some of your wants, right? And I think everyone recognizes that needs are essential for everyday living, food, shelter, clothing, what have you. Wants are more nice to have. That being said, needs and wants are different for everyone, right? Some people might need cigarettes, for others that would be more of a want. Um, Needs and wants change over time, um, because obviously someone who is retirement age would have different needs and wants than someone who is maybe in their 20s and a student, right? So the important thing to recognize about budgets is that needs and some wants can go in there, and it does change over time and it's different for every person. So banking, we were just talking about the 2 main types of bank accounts, right? So those are checking accounts and savings accounts. And when should you use one over the other? Well, it depends. It depends on your purpose, right? Are you saving long term for some sort of goal? Or are you using it for more day-to-day transactions, right? Because the second thing that you're going to take into consideration is how many transactions might you have per month. Checking accounts typically offer far more transactions than savings accounts, right? So transactions could be anything from taking out money at the ATM to talking to a teller at the bank to having direct deposit set up in there, cashing a check, things like that. Savings accounts typically have far less transactions that are included or included until you pay a fee. So talking about fees, yeah, there's different fees associated with checking accounts and savings accounts, and it differs from bank to bank. But yeah, so you could see a lot more in fees from the checking account than from the savings account, right? So again, depends on your purpose, depends on how many transactions you think you might have in the month, and depends on fees that you might be willing to pay. So that's the basics of the difference between a checking and a savings account that we're going to go into today. And then who are the main banks out there for people who maybe are not super familiar with the Canadian banking system. We say that the big 5 are TD, Toronto Dominion, Scotiabank, RBC, which is Royal Bank of Canada, CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. Let's see, and then did we say Royal? Oh yeah, and then Bank of Montreal, BMO is what sometimes people say. BMO, Scotia, TD, Royal, and then CIBC. So those are the 5 major ones. And for those of us who are newer to Canada, the Canadian banking system, incredibly safe. So that's the very, very high level basics of banking. Great. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. All right, credit. So what do we cover in our credit workshop? Again, availability and ability, pardon me, to borrow money. Because credit is really more than just credit cards. It could be loans. It's your ability to buy something now and pay for it later. Okay, so credit is neither good nor bad. There's different advantages and disadvantages to having credit. For example, when you have a credit card, you can buy things online. It's, much more difficult to buy things through Amazon when you just have cash. Disadvantages are as you can imagine, when you are borrowing money from a lender, there are fees involved. Interest is the number one way that people think of when they think of how a lender might make money off of them. But there are other associated fees often. And so whether or not credit is good or bad for you really depends on how you use it. If you use it responsibly, then you can really build up that credit score, and then eventually credit becomes even more economical for you because you can negotiate for better terms. But if you use it in a way that is not as responsible, then it can be a source of stress for some people, because then interest and fees build and build, and now your credit history and your credit score could be negatively affected. So that's the very basics of credit there. Again, we cover that really very far in depth in our credit workshop. So let's talk about assets, because solving life challenges isn't all about money, although it is definitely a piece. So when we talk about assets at Momentum, we talk about it in very broad terms. And in fact, we look at it as having 5 main asset areas. So finances, absolutely. And that doesn't just mean income. It's about knowing how to manage the income that you have. So that's the financial piece. Connections are incredibly important when planning for the future and being able to get through little struggles in life, right? And different connections will be able to help you out in different ways, right? Good quality relationships are more important than having a lot of relationships. That's what connections are all about. Sense of self is more what you would call soft skills, right? Feeling motivated, being positive, having confidence, things like that. So that's what we talk about when we talk about sense of self. Basic needs and services, oftentimes people take for granted because we see them often, and sometimes we don't remember that not everyone has access to these things, right? So again, food, clothing, shelter, but also services that we may have access to, right? So having clean drinking water, um, being able to see the doctor or take public transit, or even being located close to a shopping mall. So that's what we talk about when we cover basic needs and services. And then skills and knowledge. So skills are things that you can do, and knowledge is things that you know how to do, right? Things that you know. So skills is what you can do, and knowledge is things that you know. And so all of these asset areas, finances, connections, sense of self, basic needs and services, skills and knowledge, it's important to know that these are all interconnected, right? And when we're setting goals for our future, or we are trying to map out how we would solve a particular challenge using, more than just money, it's important to note that these are all interconnected, right? And you may need to use assets from more than one area to get to where you want to be. So that one's a really interesting topic. Assets, I encourage you to look into that if that is something that interests you. All right, and then finally, our last basic of money management is consumerism, right? Um, so consumerism has 2 basic definitions. The belief that personal happiness comes from buying and owning things. And a big part of what causes this belief is advertising, right? And that's why it's important to understand how advertising works and its effect on your spending habits. So beside that, the second definition of consumerism is consumer protection, rights, and responsibilities. We are all consumers because we all purchase goods and services. So knowing what to do if we are a victim of fraud, knowing what sort of federal and provincial regulations protect us against unsafe products, things like that. That is absolutely part of being a smart consumer. And again, that is what we go into in depth in our consumerism workshop. So I think, please repeat the first one. Yeah, so the first definition of consumerism is the belief that personal happiness comes from buying and owning things, right? And thinking that, oh, the more I buy, the more I spend, the happier I will be, right? And that can become dangerous because it tends to lead to impulsive buying and overspending, right? And again, a big part of what influences people to believe that happiness comes from buying and owning things is advertising. Advertising's entire job is to make you feel that your wants are actually needs, right? So again, going back to the designer clothing example, advertising job is to make you feel that everyone else has this. You need to have this as well, and you need to have it right now, right? Lots of great examples of that on the FCAC website. What's the FCAC? FCAC is the Financial Consumerism Agency of Canada. It is a federally run sort of body, and there's lots of information on different money management topics there as well. But again, if you're interested in learning more about consumerism and the effect that your purchasing decisions have on the environment and the community, and of course on your your budget, then I would really encourage you to sign up for Momentum's consumerism workshop.
Excellent. So if anybody has any questions, yeah, pop them in the chat or put them into the Q&A box. Um, let's kind of look at some overview stuff as we get the questions coming in. So for anybody who's watching this that isn't in Calgary, and they have questions about learning more about their budgeting and assets and stuff like that. So you mentioned the FCAC website. So do they cover a lot of this as well? Is that another option for those, say, that are in, Winnipeg or, Northern Ontario, or are there other places people can go, and can they access your information as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Heather. Thank you for asking that. So you're right. If you are viewing this from a different province, then you would find more general information on the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada website.
No, I've been through a couple of your workshops because we've done them here through our online programs. Um, if you are interested in doing or watching those recordings through Momentum, they do have good information in general, and it, like, especially the budgeting one, I found is quite handy. Um, we have a question about the consumerism. And you know what? This is a hard one for everybody. How do you control your spending when you're like, darn, that handy chopper, it just would make my life so much easier. And I mean,
All
that
right.
handy chopper really is a want. It is not a need because mine just lives in my cupboard. I don't think I've pulled it out in 2 months. Um, so
Fair.
do you have any tips or tricks to I guess quickly acknowledge that? How do you discern between a need and a want?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question, Heather. And you're right, we do cover that a little bit more in our budgeting workshop. How do you discern between a need and a want? Oh, so difficult because um, it's different for every person, right? But one thing that helps me personally is knowing that needs come first, right? So if you were to write down a huge list of what you are purchasing, right? Let's say what you purchased last month. And we do talk about different ways to track your expenses in our budgeting workshop. But let's say if we were to track our expenses for a month and we look back at that list, right? I think a lot of people know what the basic needs that are essential for everyday living are first, right? We can all agree that paying the rent is a need, paying the utilities is a need, right? Getting groceries is a need. So once you have identified the needs first, it makes it easier to say, okay, out of this smaller list, what is also a need, but what is a want? Right? Again, because needs and wants, some wants, are going to make it onto your budget. But it's about a prioritized spending plan. So needs are the priority, and then we get to look at what sort of wants we can afford. Yeah, so that's what I would say about discerning between needs and wants. Now, in terms of spending, yeah, you're right. It's so difficult to curb your own spending when you don't know where to start, right?
Mhm.
Especially because, advertising is everywhere. And the store's whole job is also to make you spend as much as you can before you leave there. That's how they make their money, right? So it's all about being aware of your own spending habits and perhaps slowing down a little bit and asking yourself questions as you're making the purchase, before you're making the purchase, perhaps making a plan so that you're more aware of what you're spending on, why you're spending, and that can perhaps make you it makes you more informed, right? And then you can make better decisions when you're faced with a purchase and you're kind of on the fence about it.